Believe it or not, somewhere in this pile of parts is a 1990 Charvel TX Custom. So I'm going to get to work assembling this thing today, and let's see how far I can get. Actually, the Charvel didn't really come to me as a pile of parts. It came to me as a complete guitar. And when I got it, I started out by checking the neck relief and the action, just to make sure that all was good with the neck. I also began by checking the frets in the tongue area, just to make sure there were no high ones, and luckily there weren't. I then set about the process of removing the strings, which were really crusty from this guitar being stored in an attic for many years. This guitar was in fairly rough shape when I got it, which is the reason for the complete disassembly. I began removing many parts off of this guitar, starting with the back plate. This allowed me to inspect some of the wiring in the guitar, which is fairly unique. It actually has both a 5-way blade switch and a push-push control on the tone pot, which basically configures the middle pickup so that you can either have all 3 pickups operating at one time or just the neck and the bridge. But unfortunately, the push-push pot was not working properly. From there, I could flip the guitar over and start removing the pick guard. The pick guard is actually underneath an overhang on the end of the neck where the 22nd fret is. So I was able to remove the screws but not fully remove the pick guard at this point. And then I had to set at removing the neck. The neck on this guitar is attached to a tongue that has an angle to it so that you can access the higher frets more easily. So there are actually 2 different lengths of screws on the neck plate that I had to keep track of. And then the neck on this guitar actually has a truss rod that's accessed from the heel end of the neck, which isn't the most convenient thing in the world, but at least it works. Then I also set about the process of removing the bridge saddles. Whenever I do this, I like to try to keep the bridge saddles in order, in the order they came out, because that way I don't have to start all over with all of my action settings. So it makes the setup a little bit easier when I go to reassemble. Like most any Telecaster, the bridge on this guitar was attached with screws that are actually under the saddles, so the saddles do have to come off before you can remove the bridge. And I definitely wanted to remove the bridge here because number 1, I was going to polish the guitar, and number 2, I really wanted to get a good look at that Seymour Duncan bridge pickup, which ended up being a vintage number 3 Telecaster pickup, which I think is called the quarter-pound Tele pickup now. Then I could actually remove the pick guard after I removed the pickup screws, because the pickups are actually still wired into the guitar at this point. And then I was able to remove the strap buttons next. The 90s Charvel oversized strap buttons are really cool in my opinion. After that, I did want to remove the wiring, but I also knew that I needed to make a diagram before I did that, just in case I wanted to put this thing completely back to original later. Like I said, the wiring isn't exactly working properly, so I'm probably going to start from scratch. And then from then, it was just a matter of doing some cleanup work because the guitar was just really nasty. It does have some dings and some scratches, but I'm just going to do a light polish on the top. Once I was ready for reassembly, I began by laying out all my parts on the table. And my reassembly process started with the pick guard, which got the neck and the middle pickups. These were original Jackson pickups, and of course they got 2 screws and 2 springs each for the height adjusters. This being a mismatched set of pickups with the Seymour Duncan in the bridge, I did check these for phase, and you can go see my quick tip videos if you're interested in how I did that. This Charvel has a 22 fret neck, which actually has an overhang on the end of it, and the overhang prevents you from installing the pick guard after the neck is in place. So you have to route the pickup wires through the body and then install the pick guard. And of course, all the screws before you can actually install the neck. Installing the neck plate and neck is just like it came off, with the two shorter screws at the top here and the two longer screws toward the heel because of the angle of the tongue. With the neck mounted, I simply flipped the guitar over and started installing some miscellaneous things like the strap buttons. On a Telecaster style guitar, the bridge pickup always gets installed into the bridge before the bridge gets installed onto the body. So there's 3 attachment screws and 3 springs that have to go into the Seymour Duncan pickup before we can run the wires through the body and mount the bridge. Something I didn't show on camera was that I actually scratched some of the black coating off the bottom of the bridge, and it's right in the area where the ground wire goes through the body and lays on top of the paint, so that the ground wire would make good connection with the bridge once the screws were tightened down. With the bridge installed, I flipped the guitar over and installed the jack plate with just the 2 screws. Next, I started working inside the cavity. I installed the switch and the pots and the jack. Most of these parts are the originals, and some of them aren't working properly. Later I discovered that the 5-way switch was broken as well, so essentially I've got a lot of parts on order, and I'll do another video where I'm replacing some of those in the future. But these will hold everything in place for now and allow me to show what the guitar will look like once it's finished. After that, I got the guitar flipped back over, and I installed the knobs and the bridge saddles. You got to remember when these go back in that they get the springs, and you can definitely tell on the old bridge roughly where the intonation should be based on where the scratches were. From there, all that's left to do is restring the guitar, and I just used the same old Ernie Ball hybrid slinky strings that I have been using on most of my builds. They're a 9 on the high end and a 46 on the bottom end, so kind of a hybrid between 2 worlds, light gauge and medium gauge. Something else you'll be able to see as I'm stringing here is that I did finish up the polish on the top, and I actually went back and addressed that crack again. That's basically on the bottom right corner of the guitar here. It's filled now with a lacquer nail polish, and then it was sanded smooth and polished up again. It's pretty significant damage, so I think that's about the best I'm going to be able to do with it without fully refinishing anything. But it's good enough. Okay, so let's take a second to talk about what's going on with this old Charvel and what I've got to do next. So I have not set up the intonation yet. It's just in here rough. I've got the 2 pots replaced at this point. I've got them switched out with some Bourne's 250K pots, and I'm using the original switch. This original switch is not working properly, so I'm going to do something that will basically prevent me from having to install a push-push or push-pull pot down here on the tone, and that is I'm going to use a 12-lug switch, 5-way switch in this position, and I've got that on order and it'll be here. A 12-lug switch is basically like half of a super switch, if you've ever seen one of those from Fender. So that will allow me to do basically this pickup alone, this pickup alone, these 2 pickups together, these 2 pickups together, or these 2 pickups together, leaving out the middle. I wanted that last option just to try to capture the original Telecaster sound. So that's the way I'm going to wire this thing up. I don't think there's a lot else to do on this guitar except maybe just check for, once again, for a few high frets, setting up the action. The nut seems okay, and anyway, there's enough for another episode, but I'm going to go ahead and cut the video here. I hope you guys like the new format that I tried out on this video. Let me know what you think, and see you in episode 2. And don't forget, like and subscribe if you want to keep seeing these videos. Thanks a lot.